Welcome back to another video, and in this video we're going to be continuing on with our macOS development with AppKit tutorial series. And in this particular tutorial we are going to be taking a look at how we can create toolbars in our macOS applications programmatically. Now you could easily do this with storyboards. And there may or may not be some complications. Your app may crash if you do something wrong, and whatnot. And that is okay. That's how we learn. But we're not going to be dealing with the storyboard today. We're going to be working with actual code and how we can add it programmatically. Now, when we add toolbars programmatically, there are multiple ways to do it. But the two primary ways are by using a window controller, so an NS window controller subclass, or by using a subclass of NS view controller. In this video, we're going to be using our main view controller for this, but you could set up a window controller class that subclasses NS window controller. Go into your storyboard, go into the identity inspector of the window controller inside of your window controller scene, and set its class to your custom NS window controller subclass, and do it that way. That would work fine. In fact, we'll go through that just so you have an idea of what we're gonna on what you can do with that. But again, we're gonna primarily use the method with a view controller. Excuse me, I'm still kind of sick here, but that's besides the point. Let's go ahead and get started. So inside of Xcode, we're gonna first start out by showing you how you can create an NS window controller subclass. Excuse me, and how you can assign that to the window controller in your storyboard. So we'll go into our navigator, go into our project navigator, and then I'm going to say new file from template. We'll say template chooser, and I want a Cocoa class. We'll call this window controller. And then instead of subclassing NS view controller, it'll be NS window controller. Okay. All right, so we have NS window controller subclass called window controller. Let's create this. Let's see. Yeah, okay. We will create. All right. So here's our window controller. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that comment up at the top. So when you create a NS window controller subclass, it'll look very similar to a subclass of NS view controller, with a couple exceptions. Okay, so what we get inside of our window controller subclass is we get a window did load method. And inside of window did load is probably a good place to put your code for configuring the toolbar, because then by that point you have a window object and the window has fully loaded and all that sort of stuff. Okay? Now, we'll talk a little bit about how we can use our view controller to access the window to put our toolbar in the window, because we have to do it that way instead of our view controller. And there is a little bit of a catch to it, and we'll talk about that. So now that we've created our window controller, let's go into the storyboard. And inside of the storyboard, I'm going to use the document outline to select the right thing. Alright, so we want the, let's see, yeah, we want the window controller. I'm going to show the inspector. And then we want the identity inspector. And we want the custom class section here. So inside of the custom class disclosure group in our inspector, we want a custom class name. And we want window controller, like that. So now we can save that. And instead of just using NS window controller, it'll use window controller for its class. Let's save that, run it, and see what happens. So we get a successful build. It's got to load and do its thing here. And here we go. Here's our app. Everything loads perfectly fine. You could add some code to window did load to make sure that it works just fine, that everything gets called like it should. But that is how you can create a custom window controller class that subclasses NS window controller to allow you to create a toolbar. Now, the process of creating a toolbar is the same for both creating it in a window controller or a view controller, so you should be able to follow along pretty easily here. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to increase the font size. No, I don't want that. Come on. Let me increase the font size here, why don't you? No, I don't want a new tab. Xcode. Cooperate with me here. There we go. Let's double check the font size. I'm going to increase it again just slightly. There we go. All right. So, the first thing that we're going to do in creating a toolbar is we need to create an identifier for our toolbar. Now, why do we need an identifier for a toolbar? There should only be one, right? Not necessarily. Remember, macOS applications support multiple windows, and each of those windows could have a different toolbar. So AppKit needs to be able to uniquely identify each toolbar. Hence why we need an identifier. why we need identifiers for toolbars as well, or toolbar items rather as well, is a self-explanatory reason, but AppKit also needs to be able to uniquely identify each item in a toolbar as well. So that's why we're going to create two extensions. One, we're going to create an extension on the identifier structure of NSToolbar, and then another for NSToolbarItem.identifier, which is a struct inside of NSToolbarItem. And in each of these, we're going to create a static constant for our identifier. Excuse me. Let's go ahead and get started with that. We'll say extension NSToolbar.identifier, like that. Now, we'll say static let. We'll say main equals NSToolbar.identifier. And then this will take in a raw, a string literal for the identifier. In this case, we'll say main underscore toolbar. Like that. Now, you could, in order to ensure uniqueness, use your bundle identifier as well as like main underscore toolbar, for example. That way you ensure uniqueness and all of that. We're not going to do that here simply because we just want to do something simple. All right. Now, let's go ahead and say extension NSToolbarItem.identifier. And we're going to create an identifier for a single toolbar item because the toolbar we're going to be doing today is only going to have one item. And this item is going to bring us to the Apple website in our default browser. So we're going to be learning a few different things for that, but we're not going to deal with that just yet. We'll say static let Apple site. We'll just call it Apple, I guess. Equals NSToolbarItem.identifier. And much like with NSToolbar.identifier, we pass it a string. So it'll be Apple underscore site underscore item, like that. Cool. And those are the two extensions that we're going to be working with. Excuse me. Let's go back up to the top of our view controller. And at the top of our view controller, let's create a toolbar. Now, this is going to be the toolbar that we add to our window. We'll say var toolbar equals NSToolbar. We'll need the initializer with that gives an identifier. And in here we'll just say, we'll just say main. Like that. And so now we have our toolbar initialized. Next, we're going to actually customize this toolbar. And in order to do that, we need a new method, as well as a new view lifecycle method getting overridden. Now, why do we need a new lifecycle method when we have view_did_load? Well, here's the thing. When view_did_load gets fired off, view or NSView does not have a window, right? So what we need to do is we need to wait until the view actually appears. At that point, we know it'll have a window if it is installed in a window at all. In this case, we know it is because our view controller it gets displayed in that window. So our view will have a window associated with it. But it might not. Hence why the NS window object for our view is optional. Okay, so let's go ahead and first override that new view lifecycle method. We'll say override func view did appear. You could also use view will appear, but we're going to use view did appear. So first things first, super.view did appear. Now we'll say configure toolbar, and we'll create that method now as well. So private func configure toolbar, like that. So inside of this method, we'll say toolbar dot allows display mode customization. So this is the first Boolean we're going to work with. A toolbar has a few customization options. First, you can show only the icon. Second, you can show only the label. Third, you can show a combination of both, the label and the icon. And we, generally speaking, want the user to be able to customize that for themselves. So that's where this Boolean comes in. We'll set this equal to true. Toolbar dot allows extension items. We're going to set this to false. Toolbar dot allows user customization. This Boolean we're going to set to false. And why is that? Well, toolbars allow users to be able to customize their content. So if you have more items than the toolbar can handle, or you just simply want the user to be able to specify whether or not they want anything in the toolbar, you can support customization. But we're not going to support that here. So we'll set that equal to false. Toolbar dot. Now you can have it autosave your toolbar configuration to user defaults. So that way, in between app launches, the configuration, the customizations that you've made to your toolbar, if any, get persisted. We'll say delegate is equal to self. Now, the delegate property is an NSToolbarDelegate type. We haven't created that delegate yet, so we're gonna get yelled at by Xcode. But we will here in a moment. Toolbar dot. Come on, Xcode. toolbar dot display mode. This will tell the toolbar what its initial display mode is, or it'll retrieve the current display mode. So we'll say equals dot, I want the icon only. All right, toolbar dot you can get whether or not the toolbar is visible. You can get the identifier. You can get all the identifiers for each item in the toolbar. You can get all the items in the toolbar. You can get the selected item identifiers. You can do all kinds of stuff. All right. But that does it for configuring our toolbar. Let's actually add our toolbar items to the toolbar. Now, to add items to an NS toolbar, we need a class that conforms to NSToolbarDelegate. In this case, above our view controller, or rather, let's just do this below our view controller. We'll say extension. So this extension will be on view controller. We want to conform to NSToolbarDelegate like that. And let's go ahead and get started inside of our delegate by telling our delegate what items we want in our toolbar. So this is a good time to mention the layout of our toolbar. So what I want for our toolbar is I want the toolbar to have our item on the very far right-hand side of the toolbar. Not in the center, not on the left-hand side or anything like that. So we're going to need two toolbar items for this. One, we're going to need a system or a flexible space toolbar item, which is a system-defined toolbar item that we can use. And then we're also going to need our Apple toolbar item to display the Apple logo. Okay. So with that, we'll say toolbar. We do not want did add item. We'll remove item. Well, we want toolbar allowed item identifiers. So in here, we'll return an array of identifiers that we want to allow in our toolbar. In this case, we will return an array that contains dot flexible space, comma, and then we want Apple. However, if you take a look at all the different identifiers, we have a bunch of system-defined ones. So, for example, cloud sharing, flexible space, inspector tracking separator. We've got prints, show colors, fonts, sidebar tracking separator. We've got all kinds of stuff here that we can use. We got a normal space item. We've got a toggle inspector item, toggle sidebar. There's a bunch of system ones that we can work with, but we don't want to work with any of them. If there is something that you want to work with, you can. I urge you to look at the documentation to see any NSToolbarItem subclasses, because those do exist. For example, NS Sharing Service Picker has a toolbar item variant to allow you to share stuff from the toolbar, which is useful. There's one for searching. There's all kinds of items there that you can work with, and I urge you to take a look at them. All right, so now we have our allowed items for our toolbar. Now we'll say toolbar default item identifiers. This is for specifying which items we want inside of the toolbar by default. So we'll return, again, an array of toolbar item identifiers. And we'll say dot flexible space and dot apple. Next, we want to specify which items the user cannot move. So what items they cannot customize. And again, it'll be an array of item identifiers. We'll say dot flexible space and dot apple. All right, next we want the identifiers, we'll say, the next thing we'll do is item for, we'll specify our actual toolbar items that we want added to our toolbar pretty much. All right, so item for identifier at index, and so it'll be for 0 indexed. For example, 0 is the first, 1 is the second, 2 is the third, so on and so forth. And we'll go ahead and we'll say let item equals NSToolbarItem. We need to pass it the identifier that we're given here. So item identifier, like that. And next, we need to actually determine what the index is. So if it's 0, we want the flexible space. So the flexible space will then push the second item all the way to the right-hand side of the window. If it's 1, we want to have our Apple toolbar item. If it's anything else, we want to return nil. Because if you take a look at the signature of this method, it returns an optional NSToolbar item. So let's go ahead and have a switch. And we'll say index. Let's see. Okay. So I guess we won't be doing that. That's fine. I was wrong. There is no index. My brain is in table view mode here. We'll say switch item identifier and then inside of here we'll say case dot flexible space. We will simply we'll simply say item, or rather we will simply return item because our flexible space doesn't need any specific customization. Case.apple. Here we're going to specify some customization. So we'll say item dot, we'll say action is equal to selector. We'll say Apple clicked. Item dot target equals self. Item dot image is going to be equal to an NS image with a system symbol name of Apple logo, and we'll say nil for the accessibility description. And then we'll say item dot label is equal to go to Apple. All right. Now, if you wanted to use a custom view for your toolbar item, you could. That's what the view property does. If you want it to have a border, you can do that as well. If you want it to be enabled, you can specify that. So we'll say is enabled equals true. So we'll say then item dot. You can specify whether or not it's hidden. You can specify whether or not it's a navigational item. You can get whether or not the item is visible, which it pretty much just returns to you whether or not the is hidden property is true or false. You can get the identifier for the item or specify it. There's all kinds of stuff you can do here. You can specify a tooltip. You can get the toolbar that the item is associated with. All that kind of stuff. And then we will return item like that. In the default case, we will return nil like that. Now, there is a couple errors that we need to take care of. And that is that we need to specify, a selector an action method that gets executed when this toolbar item is clicked. So to do this, we'll go above our extensions. So we'll go above our delegate here. Okay. All right, we'll say at objc private func. Well, not private. Because if it's private, our extension can't see it. We'll say at objc func apple clicked, like that. And then in here, we will use NS Workspace to open the Apple website in our default browser. And we can do this by saying NS Workspace .shared .open. Now this takes in a URL object, so we'll say URL with a string of https://www.apple.com, like that. Alright, so now we have another error, so let's take a look at what that one is. Okay. Okay. There we go. And we should be good. So the last thing that we need to do is we need to actually add the toolbar to the window. In which case, what we're going to do is inside of our configure toolbar method, we'll say guard let window equals view dot window, else we simply want to return. And once we have our window, we will say window dot toolbar equals toolbar. So save that and run your code. So we have a successful build. And here is our toolbar item. Let's click this. And here we go. It loads the Apple website exactly how we intended. Now if we go back into Xcode here, okay, we can specify another property which might be important. So window dot, we want toolbar style. Now, there are a few options here that you can use. It really depends on what you want your toolbar to look like and how you want it to behave. But we've got unified. And what this one does pretty much is that it'll have your toolbar appearing next to the title of your window. Automatic tells the system to determine based on the context which would be best. Expanded. What that'll do is it'll place the toolbar beneath the title of the window, so you have more space, hence why it's called expanded. We have preference. And what this one will do pretty much is that it'll specify that you want a toolbar where where it's similar to expanded. The toolbar will appear beneath the title of the window. However, the items will be centered instead of placed wherever you placed them. Unified compact. This is very similar to unified, except it has reduced margins to give the content a little bit more room to breathe. But we want unified. We'll save this and run it now. And here's our app now. You can see our unified toolbar here. Again, we can click the button and it goes to the Apple site. Exactly what we wanted. Alright. So that pretty much does it for this video on how we can create NS toolbars and toolbar items in our macOS applications. I know it was a little bit long, but NS toolbars are a little bit more complicated than most AppKit controls, simply because of how they work. So with that being said, make sure you leave a like on the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't. It helps out the channel either way. Subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell to be notified of new videos every time they come out. Also follow me on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, because I post stuff over there as well. Anyways, that pretty much does it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.